So maybe you've seen those patients who just keep saying, I can't get my hamstrings more flexible. Or you've dived into this debate that's been happening recently about should you stretch the hamstrings or should you strengthen the hamstrings for flexibility? Well, in this video, we're going to dive into it all. Hey guys, Khalid here. Welcome back to Clinical Physio. So this is a huge debate and something we get asked about all the time. So in this video, we're going to break down the research on what the latest stuff says about how to increase hamstring flexibility, and we're going to show you some of our key exercises that we give in order to help people to gain more flexibility in the hamstrings. So let's start with the research. So this first paper is a cracker, one I use all the time. Afonso et al. 2020, strength training is as effective as stretching for improving range of movement. This systematic review really opened up my eyes and kind of highlighted to me that even though strengthening and stretching might achieve the same in terms of range of movement, how much more benefit do we get from eccentric strengthening? Not only is it the confidence that the patient can gain in believing that their strength is higher, but also you're including the whole chain. So if you're thinking about the hamstrings, eccentric training is going to focus on the paraspinal muscles, the gluteal muscles, the calf muscles, and the hamstrings. And for me, I do believe it's more likely to breathe long-term results into your patient's flexibility. And for me, one really common theme when I think about those patients who say, I just can't stretch my hamstrings, is because they've been doing stretches for such a long period of time. And this movement towards eccentric strengthening, I personally have definitely seen better results with my patients, but also it makes sense from an injury prevention point of view. When do we feel that hamstring tightness? It's during compound movements, like when we're bending forwards or when we're sprinting, for example. Now, when we're doing a static stretch, we're just holding the muscle in a particular position for a long period of time. There's no movement involved. There's no collaboration between the different muscles. Whereas, of course, when we feel that tightness is compound movements, when we do have multiple muscular interaction, when there is dynamic movement. And it's just another reason for me why dynamic, eccentric exercises do make better exercises when we're thinking about flexibility. Now, to continue with this theme, I've got a specific paper from Barbosa et al. 2020 focusing on hamstring eccentric strength and functional performance after static stretching or dynamic stretching. So, whilst this was only a small study with 45 individuals, they separated these individuals into three groups: those who did no stretching, those who did static stretching, and those who did dynamic eccentric stretching. So after being asked to do the relevant stretching protocols, each group then did three functional tests. Number 1, a 20-meter sprint. Number 2, a triple leg hop test. And number 3, a knee flexor eccentric peak torque test, therefore looking at the functional capacity of the hamstrings to manage eccentric load. And interestingly, the static stretching group actually showed reductions in their eccentric peak torque and their functional tests, potentially showing that after static stretching, the hamstrings are more vulnerable to injury than other modes of stretching. Now, sure, this is only looking at the hamstrings in a short-term capacity, a short period of time after the stretching. However, I think it just goes to show that the evidence supporting the use of static stretches for the hamstrings is reducing, and is another reason why I'm increasing the amount of eccentric strengthening that I'm doing with these patients. So, how many and how often? Well, we have this study from Vetter et al. That highlights that doing eccentric training 2 to 3 times a week is effective for the hamstrings to improve flexibility and to improve strength as well. And in terms of reps and sets, I tend to look at around 12 to 15 reps, so a little bit higher across 2 to 3 sets. But the key thing when I'm doing these exercises is explaining to the patient that they've got to focus on the eccentric component of the exercise and really focus on the hamstrings during that movement. Okay, so what kind of exercises are we actually talking about? Well, the first one I'm going to show you is a Romanian deadlift, an RDL, one of the best. So you can start with this without any weight at all if you want to, just trying to get your patient to get used to the movement, as I'm doing here, where the key focus is that I'm sticking my bottom backwards, hands on a chair for support, and you can see just how hard my hamstrings are working during this exercise. Then, of course, you can progress it so that you've got a weight involved with your patient standing up and then lowering that weight towards the floor. Notice the bottom going backwards. And of course, you can even do this on a single leg as well to really get those hamstrings working. Then we have heel slides, a really great thing that you can do to stretch out those hamstrings whilst getting them to load under eccentric control. As you can see with our model here, we're using the heel sliders that you can find in a gym setting, but if not, you can also do this on a gym ball as well. Then we have Nordic curls, one of the most common exercises you'll see here because it clearly works the eccentric capacity. However, there are suggestions that it works the knee component of the hamstrings a little bit more than the hip as well. So therefore, make sure that you're focusing on something like RDLs as well as these Nordics if you want to improve flexibility. Now, if you want specific exercises in the gym where you've got all that equipment, I often talk to patients about doing an eccentric hamstring curl. So pulling the weight up in a concentric manner, but then really focus on lowering it slowly down the floor to get those hamstrings really working. You can obviously do this bilateral, both legs, and progressing onto a single leg as you feel able. And finally, an exercise I really love because it really focuses on the proximal hamstrings, the hip, pelvis, and lumbar spine components, which is this glute ham machine. And the idea here is that you're lowering yourself down, lifting yourself back up, really focuses on the hamstrings lengthening during that process. Of course, you can start on 2 legs and you can progress to 1 leg to make it harder if you want as well. So guys, I really hope this video has helped. Please support us if it has by smashing that like button and subscribe to the channel for all our best updates. Remember, you can get loads more from us on Instagram @clinicalphysio and on our website clinicalphysio.com. My name's Khalid. Keep those hamstrings flexible. See you soon here on Clinical Physio.